Well, you're Grandma Janet.
I am.
Tell me, so we're going to start the interview at the beginning of your life.
Whoa,
Well, what's your first memory?
way back there, huh?
Yep.
I was born in Jefferson City,
Okay.
and the first thing that I remember was when Marilyn was born in San Antonio.
Oh.
We were in San Antonio because my dad was in the Army.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the kind of day it was. It was kind of damp and warm, kind of like today.
Mm-hmm.
And so my mom brought this new baby home, and I had gotten a pair of patent leather shoes, probably to make me feel better about giving up my spot as the only. So I put on my patent leather shoes, and Mom was lying in bed, and I climbed up on the bed with her with my shoes on.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's my very first memory.
Mm-hmm.
It came complete with what kind of day it was and kind of how it felt.
That's cool.
And I think I was 4.
Mm-hmm.
I would have been 4.
How many siblings do you have? Talk a little bit about your siblings.
Siblings. Okay, well, Marilyn was born in San Antonio, and she's 3.5 years younger than me. And then Jim was born in Columbia because my dad went to school after he got out of the Army.
Mm-hmm.
So he was born in Columbia, and he was 2 years younger than, no, 2.5 years younger than Marilyn. And what I remember about him as a baby is that he was very red-faced because he's blonde.
Yeah.
You know, so he was a very rosy baby. And then Susan was born when I was a sophomore in college. So she's a trailer in the family. So
Yeah.
so I would have been, what, 19? Yeah, probably 19
Okay.
when she was born. So she's almost like another generation.
Yeah. She's almost as old
Yeah.
as my dad.
Right. Yeah, there's not too much of a gap there.
Mm-hmm. So
And it's kind of funny that Hank, the fellow that lives the uncle that lives in California, he is 7 years older than I am.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of that step down.
Mm-hmm.
Then Drew was born, and Susan was young enough that they played
Yeah.
ball and stuff together.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a frog in my throat.
Uh-oh. What do you remember about growing up? Memories from like
the part about Columbia growing up, we lived in student housing,
Mm-hmm.
and almost everybody that was in school at that point, that would have been like 1947 or 8, they were families. The husband had been in the Army. They were coming back to finish their education after World War II. And so there were gobs of kids. I mean, if you walked out on the gravel sidewalks, and there were kids everywhere, so you had plenty of people to play with.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing I remember about Columbia is that I went to Lee School. Lee School is all the way on the other side of campus from where we were, which is close to the stadium.
Yeah.
And I was 6 years old, and there were no buses. So I had to walk through campus to get there. And I remember that being a little scary.
Yeah.
That I was afraid I'd get lost, because campus is,
Yeah.
the streets don't all run straight.
Mm-hmm.
And there are lots of buildings.
Yeah.
So that I remember. Then when my dad finished school, we moved to Kirksville.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first time I remember us having a car and a refrigerator.
Oh.
Because up until that point, we were either renting in Army housing or university housing. So in Kirksville, we lived kind of next door to a very small park. It had a swimming pool, not a very nice swimming pool, and it had 2 cannons.
Oh.
Because at that point, people put cannons in parks.
Yeah.
It was a different time, and you could climb on those cannons, which was fun.
Oh, yeah.
And then I lived in Kirksville until I was in junior high. I remember riding my bike a lot. You could ride in a circle around Highway 63. You rode on the shoulder. Wouldn't do that today.
Yeah.
And you could make a big circle and come back into town. So those are kind of my memories there. Walked a lot because the junior high was on the what was Northwest State University, now Truman.
Yeah.
The junior high that I went to was on campus, and we were probably 12, maybe 12 blocks, about a mile away. So long walk.
Yeah. Is there anything you particularly remember about like middle school?
Well, junior high was probably middle school.
Okay, junior high
Yeah.
back then.
And because it was like 7th, 8th, 9th grade. But then we moved, when I was in 8th grade, we moved to Union. And so I went to high school. And it was a 4-year school.
Ooh.
So I really, if I would have stayed in Kirksville, I would have gone one more year to junior high and then gone to high school. And my dad was teaching at the high school. So that would have been interesting.
Yeah.
But he changed jobs, decided to do something besides teaching when he went to Union.
Is there what pops up in your mind when you think about high school?
Okay, I started to high school in Washington, Missouri, because we couldn't find a house in Union.
Okay.
And I went one semester there, half a year. And so all of the kids that were coming in to that high school from rural areas, like the Slempers, were in that high school. But I hardly got acquainted with anybody, because everybody was new. But then when I moved to Union, I was the new girl.
Oh.
It's nice to be the new girl because in a small high school, small town, there are not many new girls.
Yeah.
So that was kind of fun, the middle of the year. And I enjoyed high school. I wasn't very confident.
Yeah.
And I was a good student. I was on the student council, and but was not good at sports. And kind of sports were the big deal. So the people that were real popular were either athletes or cheerleaders. But I kind of hung with that group.
Okay.
Even though I didn't play sports. And Union didn't, they didn't have a football team. All they had was girls volleyball and basketball, guys basketball. So, it was kind of a small pond. You couldn't find in a bigger school where you can find kind of your group that you hang with.
Yeah.
And so I mostly hung with the church group, church youth group, and good students.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was
So you hung out with the good kids.
I was a good girl.
Can you talk about your dad a little bit? Any memories growing up? Anything that pops?
Very kind person, a good dad. Worked a lot, when he was either a student or, he worked for Nifong's for when he was in school in Columbia, and then taught high school, worked with the VOAG boys and FFA, would take them on trips. And at that point, if you were teaching VOAG, you did farm visits. So after your school hours, you would go out and see how your students were doing on the farm. And so he was gone a lot. A funny thing that I remember about him was that he would help out. The faculty had to help out at football football games at that point, and because they had a football team. And it was cold. Kirksville is cold. It's more like Iowa.
Yeah.
And so when he would get ready to go to the football game, he would put on long underwear, and then he would run through the house to amuse the kids before he put on the rest of his heavy coat and everything to go to a football game. So it's, fun person. Liked to fish, and was interested, very active at church. and involved with Brotherhood and a lot of things there. And wanted to be a farmer because he grew up on a farm. And so he bought a farm when we moved to Union and got a tractor and a couple cows and some sheep. And it was fun to be on the farm. It's you know, a lot of fun things you can do. So, and then he worked at a MFA bulk fertilizer plant where they put lime on fields and stuff, agricultural stuff. So mostly agriculture. Then he went back to teaching when I was, I guess while I was in college. He went back to teaching and was a principal at an elementary school, a rural elementary school that had wonderful cooks. And he loved, he enjoyed, they would make pie. You know, they didn't follow what a larger school would do as far as meals and stuff. Fixed lots of, you know, homespun kind of stuff and old favorites. So living the good life with things that he enjoyed eating. Always enjoyed eating.
Yeah. What's a favorite memory you have of him?
Oh, gosh, I don't know.
Or maybe top 3.
Yeah. He let us have, we boarded a person's, Marilyn and I were both kind of horse crazy. And we boarded some horses, which I'm sure, you know, made a lot of extra work for him. And he kind of guided us through how to catch a horse and how to saddle up, and we had some fun with that. The other thing that he let me do is he let me drive. I love to drive. And he had a big dump truck that was related to work. And I remember one time he said, you could drive that, you know, with shift on the floor and everything. And he was with me, but I was probably 15. And was very trusting, probably too trusting, of you know, letting you drive the tractor. Marilyn and I drove the tractor into the pond, into the creek one time, and it was just sinking down in the sand, and we had to get a neighbor to pull the tractor out. It looked like it was something you could drive through. Yeah, it was a little creek. But yeah, he put up with a lot of childhood stupidity. One year we wanted a Christmas tree, and the prettiest tree we could find, just the top was pretty. And so we, Marilyn and I again, took a saw, and we went down and we sawed the top out of the tree. And it looked horrible after that, of course.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Yeah, talk about your mom.
Mom probably was, both Mom and Dad were very smart, but Mom had a lot of good sense smart. And she always made my dad feel like he was in charge. But really, as I got older, realized that that she often made the important decisions and then helped him to carry through on them. And she was an excellent teacher. Both of them were excellent teachers. And she worked with children with learning disabilities and was, you know, real good. I know one summer we kept a little boy all summer that she tutored. So she really, you know, gave herself to that. So a very, very wise, smart woman. Marilyn and I talk a lot about just things that she knew or had read about as far as you know, keeping everybody healthy, keeping your kitchen really clean, things that very distracting.
Yeah.
Things that made our life easier. That until when we were grown up, we realized
Yeah.
that she was the one that was, kind of holding things together.
What's a favorite memory you have of your mom?
She went back to college after Jim was born. When we moved to Kirksville, she went back and finished her college degree. And she really enjoyed being a student. She took a music appreciation class, and she would bring these LP vinyl records home, and she would include us in learning about those. And so lots of, walking through, she would walk through the woods in the spring and tell you the names of all the plants and flowers. And some of them were right, some of them weren't right. But, to this day, when I walk through a wooded area, I can identify things that she told me about. And then she told me about there was it a great-grandmother, I think, who was an herbalist. And she had a book, and it had like home remedies in it, and would be out in the woods, picking up different plants that she used as medicine. Must have been a great-grandmother, because that would have been 2 generations back. So,
what was it like having siblings growing up?
I was the bossy big sister. And I have to apologize to Marilyn for a lot of things. One day she wanted her hair cut in a pixie with the little points, So I took scissors, with her permission, and it did it like a pinking shears. So she had this notch thing on the top of her head. We did a lot of kind of crazy things together. Had a lot of fun times. Jim, I think he kind of hung out with Dad, but he had a tremendous sense of humor. And when he was about 12, 13 years old, he collected hats, and he always had on a different kind of hat. But just a funny guy, fun to be with.
Yeah.
And of course Susan, Stan had a convertible when we got married, and Susan would come and visit us, and we'd take her for a ride in a convertible. And she one time she was playing, and she hid under a table that had a skirt over it, and we couldn't find her. It was sort of like, oh my gosh, we lost my little sister. And finally she giggled a little bit, and we found her under there. But she was a lot of fun. Like Stan would build her. He got refrigerator boxes. When we were dating, he would bring a refrigerator box, and he would cut holes in it and make her a house. And I mean, he was her big favorite, like a big brother that would do things for her. So yeah, she was fun, and still is fun.
Yeah, still is fun.
Yeah.
We're gonna see them all.
Yeah, very soon.
So talk a little bit about going to college.
I'm not real sure how I ended up at Blue Mountain College. I was interested in. I looked at Lindenwood, which was a girls' school in St. Charles. I think I partly wanted to do something that was a little bit fancy, because I grew up in a family that was very poor. We had plenty to eat and all that, but we didn't do a lot of fancy things. So I think that was part of the allure of a women's school. My guidance counselor's mother had gone to Blue Mountain College. And so he was the only kind of advisor that we had, which wasn't much of an advisor. And so when I was looking at, I said something about Lindenwood, and he said, "Oh," he said, "you're Baptist." He said, my mom went to a Baptist women's college. He said, you might like it. He said, it's small, it's in the South. And then I also had a little bit of a romantic viewpoint of the South, you know, that there were antebellum homes and, you know, fancy dresses and not anything about slavery. It was all about, you know, high living. So that was kind of, you know, it's like, oh, you could get a Southern accent. Wouldn't that be exciting? So, and I went there, and Mom and Dad drove me down, and we toured the place, and it was small, and I think that was an appeal too. That I keep thinking if I'd have gone straight to MU, I probably would have gotten lost and probably wouldn't have ended up getting advised on my classes and getting my schedule made or something. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of good that I went there. It also helped me out from the standpoint of coming out of Union High School. I didn't have much math and science, and so like chemistry and some of those things, they made sure that you got the help you needed with the math to get through. Which, if I'd have come here, I probably had to take it twice. So, but it wasn't really a school that you probably wanted to stay all 4 years unless you were going to be a missionary. Yeah. Had good Bible, a lot of good Bible classes, which were and they were required. Yeah. So met some nice friends. I had one friend that her from Missouri, that her mom and dad ran the children's home that's in St. Louis, a suburb of St. Louis. And so we traveled back and forth together. And she had a boyfriend at MU, and I had a boyfriend at MU. Oh. And so we came up for a ball game one time.
Ooh. What was that like?
To come here?
Yeah, coming up to Columbia from...
Well, we took the train.
Oh.
The city of New Orleans still runs, I think, from New Orleans to Chicago through St. Louis. So we took the train, and then Mom and Dad picked us up, and I don't remember how we got to Columbia. I guess we drove. Who knows? Went to a ball game. I think we wore heels. At that point, when you went to a football game, you dressed up. Well, that ship has sailed. Yeah. And it should have sailed. It was not a good thing to be walking around campus in high heel shoes. Mm-hmm. So, but then I transferred to MU, and and I did academically. There was no difference. I couldn't made the same grades at Blue Mountain as I made here. Blue Mountain had the advantage of a lot of like the English professor was pretty well known as an author, and because it was a small school, they got some professors who didn't want to be in a larger environment and have to publish and to keep up with everything. Yeah. So they had good teachers, but usually there was like one or two per department, so you got kind of narrow viewpoint. I
think he's going to get something to eat.
Oh, gosh. What else you want to know?
So you came to Columbia. I guess talk a little bit about that, coming to Columbia for college.
After college?
Yeah.
Okay, when I graduated, I had a job in Berkeley, Missouri, which now is not a very nice place to live, but then was one of the higher paid school districts, and very well equipped because it's McDonnell Douglas has their tax basis was running for that school. Okay. Now it's combined with Kinloch, and of course it's an older area now, not quite as nice. What was after college.
Berkeley.
And then I had met Stan my senior year. Okay. At Memorial, in the kitchen, fixing student dinner. They did a Sunday night dinner because the dorms didn't serve. And so I went to teach, but then on weekends I would come to Columbia, or Stan would come, or we'd meet at my folks or something.
So it was long distance.
Yeah, well,
Kind
not
of.
too long. And then we were planning to get married in June, so I knew I was only going to teach 1 year there.
Yeah.
And then I went back to graduate school because we thought we might not end up staying in Columbia, and if I was going to continue to teach, it would be good for me to have a master's. So I did that.
Yeah. What was your first
years.
impression of Stan?
Of Stan?
Yeah.
Obnoxious. He was snapping the girls with a tea towel in the kitchen.
So he was obnoxious.
He
When
was
you first...
obnoxious. But actually, we hung around. It was a group that hung around together, and most of us didn't have cars, and so we would get together, a group, BSU kids, and and Stan was good about hauling my friends around, and there, like where Discovery Park is now, there was a place there that you could rent horses. So after church one day, Stan had on a sports coat. He had gone to church, and we all went down there and went horseback riding. So Stan is, looking gallant, galloping along on his horse. We went and we went roller skating, did a whole lot of stuff. Stan said he thought I was very sports oriented, which is really the last thing that I would do. So, but he was. We had a lot of fun as a group, and then of that group we kind of paired off.
Yeah.
So.
How'd things start in between you two? So it started at Memorial.
Yes. Yeah. And a group of friends that like to do things together. So it was a pretty large student group there at that point. Probably, maybe 40 or 50 students. In fact, I think that church probably had a larger number of students than any other church in town. And then the BSU also had a pretty good program. It's where the Hillel. Well, next to the Hillel, and now it's they have a fine arts building there on that corner. So we spent a lot of time there.
Could you talk a little bit about your first kid, Drew?
First kid, Drew. Well, I was still finishing that master's degree and feeling kind of sick. So then he was born in October, and he was a easy baby, easygoing, cute. He had blonde hair and brown eyes, big brown eyes and blonde hair, and this was in the 60s when people wore leisure suits, and a lot of entertainers would actually kind of almost like blouses, with print in them. And so, like for Easter, we dressed Drew up in a little white leisure suit with his with his blousey looking thing on. He was fun to dress up.
What was it like raising a boy?
I think it was okay. He went to Montessori school, and he's real shy kid. Probably my fault, but your kid, whatever's wrong with your kid is always mom's fault. It happens. But I remember he would in nursery school. He would stand when they would have like group singing, and they'd be clapping or playing a triangle or something, and he'd be standing by the fish tank, kind of watching around the edge. He probably was too young to go to school. We probably should have, but at that point but it did give him an opportunity to have kids to play with. And, he had a good friend across the street that was his age. And so they played a lot together. And then one year they built, the two of them built a fort out of poison ivy. And both of them got poison ivy really, really bad. And that was miserable. He liked to draw kind of plans of elaborate houses or places to play, but you'd always find these drawings and stuff. He went to lab school at the university and went there for 5 years. So I drove him to school. Actually, we had a carpool, the neighborhood. There were 3 kids in the neighborhood that went together. And then lab school closed when he was in the 5th grade, and he had to go to public school where they had grades. He had never had grades. And that was kind of a jolt. Also that you couldn't pretty well choose what you wanted to do. And I remember they had a unit on poetry, and he got a bad grade, and I said, "What happened?" He said, "I didn't want to do it." I said, "Well, there's some things you have to do, So, but he transitioned okay.
What's a memory you have of Drew? Like, just when you think Drew, what pops up in your head?
Very kind. He's just a very kind person. And smart. And funny. He's got, and I remember Julia Barrichter, she has a hearing loss. And a lot of times when Drew was like in puppetry, when he was in junior high and high school, she said, "I'm so sorry. A lot of times Drew has some kind of a quick, funny thing that he says," and she says, "Sometimes I can't hear him," but she said, when I do, he's really good at seeing the funny side of something and talking about it. So
that's where I get that from.
Yeah, that's right. He's still that way. He still says he sees the funny side of stuff a lot of times. That
no matter what.
Yeah. Well, that's a great trait.
Yeah.
Great trait.
So talk a little bit about Rachel.
Rachel? Well, she bossed Drew around a lot. She was kind of, very talkative and would like to dress up. I know one time Drew said we were going to the dentist, and she had on, I can't remember, it was a hard hat and a pair of boots and a pink sweater or something odd. And I remember he said, "Are you going to let her go to the dentist looking like that?" So, but Drew played with Rachel. I mean, there were enough of an age difference that they got along pretty well, and he put up with some shenanigans that she did. But and second kid, you're never quite as serious with them, so we probably let her get by with stuff that we wouldn't have let Drew get by with.
What's something she got away with?
Yeah.
What is something?
That she got away with?
What's a memory?
Well, the crazy dressing, for one thing.
Okay.
Was, but and then when he would come home, come home on a school bus, and she would just be real bossy with him. Took after me, I guess. Maybe that's what happened. but they always got along well. And he kind of looked after her. And then she looked after him. They went skiing one time, and she said, she and Shauna and some other kids went skiing. It's Drew's first time he went skiing. And she said, when we got down off the mountain, she said, I told Shauna, we have created a monster. And she said he was skiing until they turned the lights out. And she said he was skiing by himself. And she said, I went with him because she said, I was afraid he was going to crash into a tree or something. So they, they kind of took care of each other as she got older, too. So, mothered him.
Yeah. He still likes skiing.
Yeah, and he still loves skiing. Yeah, and he still skis alone.
So was it like having 2 kids?
Well, it was nice. I wish that their ages, that they had been closer together. That would have been, because a lot of the trips that we took, Drew was the right age to travel, but Rachel doesn't remember those trips because she was too young. I mean, and we took some trips with her too when she was older, but like the trip to Mexico, she was too little to remember anything from it. So
what job did you have while raising your kids?
Well, I try to keep my foot in the door teaching, not very successfully. When Drew, I got my degree, and then Drew was born, and then that next year, maybe it was the second year, he was 2 years old, I taught at the university art for teachers, and then an art education class. One of them was kind of a lab, where you actually made things. The other was mostly academic stuff. And then, and that was kind of an interim job because the professor who had been there forever had retired, and they hadn't hired somebody. So I filled in that gap. And then they made a hire, and I went to the, there was a whole lot of stuff that was done. Now you would do it online, but they had, you could finish a high school degree, with classes that were by correspondence. Believe it or not, people would make artwork. They had an assignment, make artwork. They would send it in by mail. We would comment on it and send it back. Is that archaic or what? And so I had two high school classes, and then 2 of the correspondence, one for art teachers and the other for art education. And I wrote the curriculum for those, and then I would go over there and pick up the stuff, and I'd go through it and make comments, and then I'd send it back and grade it. And I did that for about probably 7 years maybe, or so, part-time, part-time job. And then then Rachel was born, so I stayed home. Then there was a elementary school at Clark, Missouri, north of here, that was losing its accreditation because they didn't have PE, music, and art. And so they hired 3 teachers. One of the ladies I knew, the lady that was doing the music. And we would ride up to Clark together. We went up 2 days a week, and we wrote a curriculum for them, so that the state would okay, and then we would show the teachers how to use that curriculum. And so I did that for 1 year. That school has now joined up with Sturgeon, so it's no longer there. But that was an interesting year because the classes were real small, and it was 1st grade through 8. And so you could do things, that we could build looms and do tie-dye, and it was really a fun year. because you had a very small group and the kids were a little older.
Okay.
And very appreciative. They were mostly country kids, and no discipline problems. One of the funny things that happened up there, this is when everybody was all up in the air about prayer in school. You can't have prayer in school. And so we were lined up to go in the cafeteria, and one of the other teachers said, "Now, Mrs. Wilson will ask someone in her class to say the blessing." So we're standing in the school cafeteria, and she points to one of the big gangly 8th graders, and he says grace. And so it was kind of like a generation ago kind of place. People were still doing things the way they had always done them. And in the spring, the kids always got to go down to, while things were in session in Jeff City. And the year that I was there, the school board decided that they could not ride down in the back of a pickup. Can you imagine? Oh my gosh. So things were changing, but it was kind of a fun year. Oh, what did I do after that? Did I do anything? Well, back then, Stan was doing a lot of enough engineering, and they were always short something.
Yeah.
Short a secretary, short a bookkeeper, short a drafts person. And so I filled in there. And then I taught 1 year at West, another place where they had a half of a class.
Okay.
They couldn't, couldn't hire a full-time person, they had a half-time person. I didn't enjoy, West Junior was a nightmare. The kids were awful. And if you wanted to be a policeman, you would have gotten along fine, but if you just wanted to teach art, and art classes, you've got sharp objects, you've got things that burn. It wasn't a good deal. That was a hard year. And then we started mapping. I think about that time we started mapping. And so I worked drawing maps, which now you do by GPS and photography. Oh, and then I started at Woodcrest. Because I'd always done a lot of volunteer kind of stuff all through those years. And that was 1991 to 1999. And then when I finished that, I went to the BSU for 4 years, worked there part-time. A lot of part-time.
Yeah. So could you talk a little bit about Drew and Rachel, going to college? What was that like?
Well, Drew lived at home and went to college. So that wasn't too much of a jolt. The only jolt was when I followed him down Nifong when he was moving to Wisconsin to get married. And I remember thinking, he's going away, never coming back. But all through college, he was, in and out of the house. And even when he lived in Fulton, when he was at Jefferson Lodge, he was he bought a house, but part of that time he was driving back and forth, which was really hard. Not a good. Jefferson Lodge was not a good time.
We don't talk about it.
Yeah, no.
He still has nightmares.
Does he still have nightmares?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was awful. We did an awful thing to him. Not my fault. I didn't want to do it.
Talk a little bit about, Drew meeting Janelle. How did you find out?
The first time I met Janelle, I was coming out of the kitchen in the house on Mill Creek, and Drew was coming in the front door, and he said, I don't think I knew anything about Janelle. It was like this girl appears, and he said, this is Janelle. Janelle Howe. And I repeated the name. I said, and I think I said Howell. And she said, no, it's Howe. like an Indian. How? So that was my first, our first meeting. And then I kind of heard the story of how they met and, you know, all that.
Yeah.
And I immediately liked her. Drew didn't bring very many girls around. I only remember really one other girl that he brought to the house, and she was a Stevens student. You know, and I mean, the first time I met her, I thought, this isn't going to work out. She's real flighty, you know, she kind of wore cute hats. And, and I just, but that, it was not a serious, that was just a very short thing. He may have dated other people that I don't know about, but.
Talk a little bit about, I guess, now Rachel, you know.
Oh, Rachel
Corey,
in college?
Mm-hmm.
Rachel, let's see, did she? Yeah, she lived in the dorm right off the bat. And then her senior year, I think she moved back to the house to save, she wanted to save the money, the Bright Flight money. And she got real involved with the BSU right off the bat and spent a lot of her time there. Rachel was always a night owl, so I always had to worry about where she was. And, you know, no phones, but she could tell you what constellations were in the sky because she's usually coming home really late. Not, you know, I'm not worried about her doing anything she shouldn't do, but just, you know, what can happen to you when you're out late at night running into a drunk or something. So Drew was not a night owl. He and Danny would drive down the business loop. That's about as. And then one time, and Danny would tell me stories. Drew wouldn't tell me.
Oh.
But Danny was, you know, immediately, all you had to do was just get him started. And so he, like one time he told me that, let's see, they were in my car. And they were going down Broadway, and he stopped at a light, and two drunks got in the back, a couple got in the back seat of the car, just opened the door and invited themselves in, you know. So they did have some adventures that I probably didn't even want to know about, you know, but I thought, well, I'm glad they didn't throw up in my car. That would have been really bad.
Was that the most memorable story Danny told you?
Yes, that's
okay.
probably the worst. But Danny spent a lot of time at our house.
I always call them your adopted kids because you had other people at your house a lot.
Yeah, we had Danny, and then we had Aaron.
Could you talk about your horses?
Horses, oh gosh.
Or ponies, I guess. Ponies and donkeys.
Long, you know, childhood leftover or something. We kept, you know, when we moved to an acreage, it was like, oh, horses. You know? Well, it wasn't going to happen that fast. So we kept some horses, 5 Arabian horses that someone needed pasture for. None of them were riding horses. And learned a lot about horses with those. And then those people got a farm and they took the horses. And then Rachel won a horse in 4-H. It was wasn't a quarter horse. What's the other one? Thoroughbred. It's a thoroughbred horse, and it was young. We sent it for training, but it was not a horse that a new rider should ride. So I traded that horse. I bought a horse from a guy at Woodcrest, a Palomino horse, and that was a good riding horse. But all along, I tried to get Rachel to ride, and she was not very interested at that point. She'd outgrown it. And I rode a little bit, and then a girl from Stevens kept her horse at our place, and I rode with her. because two horses together will do better, especially if one person's a good rider. So that was the end of that era. And then, don't know exactly what happened. How did we get the, oh, I guess I decided when the Palomino died. And so at that point I thought I should not be messing with big horses. So I'll get little horses. So that's when I got the minis that you know about, and the donkey. The donkey came with the minis because they were kind of bonded. So, and then of course the girl from Texas that loaned us the pony that you guys rode too.
Yeah.
But horses are really, well, they're expensive for one thing. They take a lot of time. They're dangerous. Even good horses are, unpredictable.
Yeah.
And so that's the end of that.
Yeah.
So now once in a while I will help Tanya out with her horse, but now her pony is gone.
Uh-oh.
So I've never messed with the big horses of hers.
Okay.
Just the pony was kind of her pet. So.
What's your favorite memory about ponies and horses?
I don't know whether I have a favorite memory about it. Well, I guess we raised the baby. The one miniature had a baby, and that was kind of fun. It's cute little pony. Could drag you all over the pasture. It was kind of a crazy little pony.
What about Burrito?
I liked Burrito. If I were living in the country, I would get a donkey because they're kind of fun.
Yeah.
And they're not. They're smart. They don't. Horses are so. I don't know. They're flight oriented. A donkey is standing still oriented.
Yeah.
Which makes the difference. But anyway, it's fun. Pets are fun.
What's your favorite memory from Mill Creek, or I guess Old Mill Creek?
Oh, the house at Mill Creek, quiet, and being just private and quiet are the parts I miss. I really don't miss the house too much. I mean, I like the house, but it was a lot of house to take care of, and it was not a cozy house. That big open area. It's pretty, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the house a lot, but I don't really miss it. A lot of maintenance. On the other hand, we live here with all this noise and neighbors. Although the neighbors have been quite entertaining for Stan.
Yeah.
It's all he can do to keep from going over and giving advice.
So could you talk a little bit about, the churches you've been to?
Oh, churches, oh my gosh.
Churches you've started.
How long have you got?
We got plenty of time.
Oh my.
I guess start off, so you went to Memorial, and then you helped start Cornerstone, correct?
Well, I'm going to start back further than that.
Oh, okay.
I grew up in a church that was really a toxic church.
Okay.
Very fundamental. A long list of things that you should not do and could not do. A very narrow interpretation of Scripture. And so when I went to college, I really was kind of turned off about church. Not turned out about not God or Jesus, but church. But when I went to Memorial was really a very progressive at the point that I started going there. It was still fundamental belief, but attitudes toward women, they did a lot of small group kinds of things, not the big long list of don'ts. Just positive. That would be the word I'm looking for. just a much more positive outlook on being a Christian. So that was good. And then when they wanted to start a mission in South Columbia, and actually part of the reason that we were interested was the youth leaders that Drew liked and identified with were going to the mission.
Okay.
So we took the leaders with us. So for our kids, it was a good move. Cornerstone, starting a new church is just a terrible struggle. Because what you get is a lot of people who either were dissatisfied with where they were. The core group of 5 families or so, I think they kind of knew what kind of church. They wanted to be a little memorial church. But very quickly we got a lot of people in that had a lot of different ideas. And so there was a lot of, bickering and just, not healthy kind of stuff. And that gets really old. And I still feel kind of guilty about leaving, like Candy and the Karwaskis and those that stuck it out. I did feel kind of like a traitor to run off. But at the same time, I got an opportunity to go to a church that really sounded good, because I had been real interested in Christian Women's Club had the same kind of seeker mentality. They would have a good speaker. They would have a meal that you could invite neighbors and friends and church people to come to, and they would hear a good message on what the advantages of being a Jesus follower. Just as simple as that. And that was going great guns. I mean, they were, like 300 people would meet for lunch. So with that thought in my head, when Barry Watts, the founder out here, when he was talking about what he wanted to do in a church, it was like, why, I want to do that. And actually Stan was working on the building, and he was talking to Barry, and Barry said, I can't do all this. He said, I got to find some people to help me out. And Stan said, well, he said, talk to Janet. He said, she's doing all those things you're talking about. Start a women's thing, start a aerobics class, have a banquet, whatever. And so that's how I ended up at Woodcrest. And Woodcrest, Barry fell apart and left, and that was traumatic. And but then Peter came, and he was really the right person for the right time.
What's a favorite memory from Woodcrest?
Well, I guess the fast growth, was just extremely satisfying. And the new approach. Now, I think things in the last, that's been 20 years ago. In the last 20 years, I'm not sure that, if you have an innovation, then you kind of have to keep innovating. And I'm not real sure that, I think that's happening, but I'm not real sure about it. It's not as exciting. And of course, I'm not as involved. But women's ministry was very satisfying. Working with people with spiritual gifts and getting them plugged in was really, really fun. I mean, I really enjoyed that. And I felt like it was a real contribution. And then a good bit of freedom of, I read a lot of stuff. I've always had this funny feeling about the Bible. And that comes out of the culturally what's going on when something's written, so that there's a lot of stuff that when I like if I was doing a Bible study, I'm like, I'm not real sure that I'm saying what I really believe or think here. Mm-hmm. And that has continued. Maybe that's old age, I don't know. Mm. But just becoming more interested in looking at what Jesus said and not paying quite so much attention to what Paul said or what the Old Testament said, because, and I'm reading a book right now that is very thorough on what was going on in Rome that mm-hmm. was affecting what they were writing. So the bottom line is I believe that Scripture is inspired. Mm-hmm. Just like somebody who writes a Christian book today can be inspired. I do not believe it was dictated by God. Mm-hmm. And so that really, in my mind, frees up a lot of the hairy stuff that people fuss about. Mm-hmm. Because if you go with a very simple love God and love your neighbor, and you put everything through that sieve, women in church is a good example mm-hmm. of we make a big deal out of it, and if you look at just what Jesus said, then it's an easy question. Yeah. You start looking at Paul. Not that I don't like Paul, but it's written to a specific.
So how is Woodcrest different than other churches?
I think just not adhering to traditions that probably were out of date, mm-hmm. and that goes for now. Yeah. Maybe what they did in 1990. Now that you wouldn't want to do that mm-hmm. now. It's changed. Yeah. Things change, and you have to. Well, somebody said one time, you take a kernel of truth, mm-hmm. and it's all wrapped up in stuff, mm-hmm. and you have to peel it down and get what is the core issue, what is the kernel of truth, and go from there. Mm-hmm. You can wrap it up in a different music, different lights, whatever. But message is the same.
Can you talk a little bit about grandchildren?
Oh,
memories?
Grandchildren are so fun. Especially nice grandchildren, like Benjamin. It really is it's a different, because your kids, I don't know what it is. I guess you feel like you have to be teaching all the time. And grandkids, you can just have fun. Let their mom and dad teach them. I've been very fortunate, though, to have, both families with grandkids here. Their principles of life are so similar mm-hmm. that I don't feel like I have to. I know a lot of grandparents who feel like they have to take their grandkid to church or he's not going to ever learn about God, mm-hmm. and that would be hard.
Yeah.
So it's much easier if you can just do the fun stuff.
Yeah.
And I've been very fortunate to have you guys being in town. Mm-hmm. It's been nice. Nathan kind of did his own thing a little bit more, but we still had some good time. When I look back through pictures, mm-hmm. I think, we did a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Then when he got to be junior high school, we didn't get together as much. And then I do wish that, I'd have been a little closer with Rachel and Rachel's kids. But, mm-hmm. but they're okay.
I'm grandma's kid.
Yeah, kind of. So, proximity does make a difference. Mm-hmm. And although Rachel, when the kids were little, mm-hmm. And when Corey died, I did spend quite a bit of time down there, and they came up here more often. Mm-hmm. But when you get into, mm-hmm. Jobs and high school and stuff, it's harder to get it done.
How did Corey's death like affect everything?
Oh gosh, that was really earth-shaking. Partly because it was sudden, and partly because he really was a perfect, perfect husband, perfect dad. From my point of view, it may not have been true, but just such a good guy to have that happen, and not really have reasons. You had a lot of questions about reasons. So kind of for me, it was kind of there was kind of a why pray kind of thing in my mind. It's like, the stuff's going to happen, whether you want it to happen or not, or whether you pray that it doesn't happen. So, yeah, just life is not easy.
So that affected your faith a little bit?
For a while, yeah, kind of a bump there, of lots of questions. Just lots of questions. I don't know that it, not so much a faith shaker. It's not like, oh, I'm going to throw this all out because God wasn't there. but just more, why did the kids have to grow up without dad? Why, that kind of stuff. Which, it's just rough. But we weren't promised a rose garden, so.
Yeah. Is there anything you learned, like, from that experience at all?
Yeah, I think sovereignty, of we don't get to call the shots, and we do the best we can, and the amazing amount of almost like little miracles that happen that do make it easier as time goes along. Okay, like monetary provision, or a good church that helps you out, or neighbors that pitch in, or family, that there is a silver lining to the cloud, I guess.
Yeah. And that was the dark year.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. But time moves on.
Yeah. So talk a little bit, what do you think your legacy will be?
Oh, gosh.
I know it's a big word, legacy.
I hope that, been a good friend, played the roles that you were given, and, whether that's parenting or whatever. Hopefully a good example of what Jesus would want you to be doing. Having a little problem with that right now, because always my doing has been through church or through whatever, and I have to remind myself that my role is here.
Yeah.
So.
Is that difficult?
Well, yeah. I mean, the other was a little bit more fun, but this is necessary. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So talk a little about your dad, and I guess I know it's a hard topic, but like Alzheimer's, how is that? Seeing him.
Yeah. I think about that a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, it's difficult to watch somebody who's very bright and very capable go downhill. But on the other hand, it almost makes death easier. It's like by degree. I can look back and say, you got to the point where this part was gone, and then this part was gone, and then memories are gone, and it really didn't get, some people, it gets to the point where they don't remember who you are, and he never got to that point, which was a blessing.
I was Travis.
Yeah, at least you were somebody.
I was somebody.
Yeah, get you mixed up. Yeah, that happens. But that happens whether you've got dementia or not. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's cruel disease. On the other hand, you don't have worries.
Yeah.
You know, it's almost like a return to childhood. That you're willing to let other people take care of you and do your taxes and do your bills and even do your care at that point. So yeah.
What do you want your legacy to be?
What I would like a little bit more of?
Or yeah, what do you want it to be instead of what is your legacy? What do you want to be remembered for? I know, it's a big question.
One I haven't thought about.
Yeah. Or is it about the same?
I think it's pretty much the same. I don't have any like big ambitions to be famous, to be rich,
Yeah.
to be just to be a decent person who lived life fully, had good friends, was grateful for good friends, enjoyed family.
Yeah.
Simple stuff, because really the rest of it is,
Yeah.
so you had a big house. Nobody cares.
Yeah.
Can't take it with you. So probably one of the things that I wish that I had been better at, which you're good at, is I'm going to use the word evangelism, but using it loosely.
Yeah.
But of talking to people about your faith and inviting people to share what you have, and not so much soul winning as just that spreading of the message through the way you live and the way you interact with people.
Yeah.
And of course, we could all use some more of that.
We could all do more like that.
Yeah, but I think your family is more so.
Yes.
Yeah. Where do you think that comes from?
I don't know. I think it's a combination of the Elmores and the Howes. Like the Howes are very evangelical.
Yeah.
More soul winning. Where it definitely does come from the Howes. Like Grandpa Bob definitely does that a lot.
Yeah.
But I think
it's good.
And then my mom, it's kind of the live your faith out.
Yes, yeah, she definitely does. In a real tangible sort of way.
Yeah.
Of course, COVID has been
Yeah.
For at least for me, I've thought, well, heck, I'm just totally worthless. But
any stories you want to tell?
Stories?
What's
about whom?
Anything. What's a story that just pops in your mind from your life?
Oh, gosh. I can't think of any story that's very interesting offhand. I guess I don't have a...
You don't have a story?
Don't have an interesting story.
What's it like having Stan run for mayor?
Crazy.
Okay.
Bless Stan's heart. He's a good guy, but when I look back, I don't know, ADD maybe, of kind of chasing rabbits to keep life interesting.
Okay.
And I see politics as one of those things. Jefferson Lodge is one of those things, and everybody has some of this, but I think Stan has more than some people, and sometimes I think I should have been a little quicker to say, we're not doing that, because I would have the feeling like Jefferson Lodge, it's like crazy. Why are we doing that? Well, we don't need to be doing that. You got an engineering firm, but and maybe that's it may be a reluctance on that being raised where men made the decisions and women kept the home, you know, that maybe I didn't say things that I should have. And then you don't want to squelch people's, you know, dreams of doing something.
Yeah, on Jefferson Lodge.
Yeah. It could work, maybe.
So you owned a lot of rentals throughout the years. So what's a memory?
Oh, gosh.
Like your kids working on rentals, you know, how was that?
Yeah. So now my son has no hearing because he mowed yards and probably
now he's
will
doing
have
the same thing.
May have skin cancer because he was out in the sun with no sunscreen on. So yeah, it does provide jobs for your children.
Yep.
And renters. You remember the bad ones, and you forget all the good ones that you had. And actually, rentals have turned out to be a good nest egg. You know, so yeah, all in all. Oh, now you're against the wall, Stan. Pull your chair out. Pull your chair out from the wall. Don't knock the wall down. Those chairs are bad.
It's off the wall.
Talk to the wall.
Talk to the wall. What was a construction firm? Talk a little bit about that.
The construction firm?
Or engineering firm.
Engineering. Well, most people start a business and they have some money to start a business. That would help. So a lot of struggle with meeting payroll every week, and one fellow told Stan when he first went into business, he said, you'll never make any money in engineering, but he said, you'll have the opportunity to pick up some property. And that kind of turns out to be true. Because if you have a lot of employees and a lot of equipment, a lot of trucks, and you just kind of, you're making a living and you're providing a living for a lot of other people. And I think Stan is real proud of that. You know, because he had 30 employees that depended on him to do a good job. But when people talk about, I want to go into business for myself, and I'm like, no, you don't want to do that, because it's hard. You know, you've got to be doing the work. You've got to be getting the work, getting it lined up. You got to be collecting, and if you don't do all those things and do them well, it just won't work.
What's a lesson you learned from that?
Don't go into business. Well, the other thing is that, I was raised in the the era when you went to work for a company, you did a good job, you got promoted, and you worked there until you retired. And of course that doesn't, that isn't the way it is anymore. People move from company to company. There's not a lot of loyalty between management and employee in a lot of places. And so, whole different ball game.
Yeah.
What was the question? Don't remember the question.
Well, don't worry. We're going to move on to something else.
Okay, good.
What's your favorite trip to ever take?
Machu Picchu.
Machu Picchu?
Yeah, definitely.
Why?
Just such an unusual geographic place. And the culture that built it, way up in the mountains, all these stones that they gathered, and the way they could grow things in really an arid, but beautiful place too.
Yeah.
And then we got to go with Sam and Marilyn. That was fun.
They're fun.
Yeah, they're fun. Actually, that, and then the second to that trip would have been the river trip, and it was great to see things in Europe along the river, but what made that trip really fun was going with a whole bunch of people that you knew, so that while while you were looking at these things, you were sharing with people that you've done life with, you know, because there were half of the people on the boat were from Memorial or you know, somebody that you knew from Columbia. And I've often thought if we, you know, oh, it'd be fun to take another river trip, but I don't think it would be the same. I think it would be disappointing in some ways, unless you went with some people that you knew.
What's the funniest memory you have in life? Big question. Funniest.
Funniest.
Just something that made you laugh.
Gosh.
I'm sure there's many.
I don't know, my dad running around his underwear was pretty funny.
That was pretty funny?
I'm sure there have been some more funny. When the little kids learning to talk, that was, I always thought I should have written a book, you know, like, I think it was it Drew or Rachel? One or the other. Dobnors for doorknobs. You know, just cute little switches of words that those are funny. We laugh a lot about that. But been a long time ago.
Yeah.
Nothing funny's happened lately. Sorry. Got any more questions up there in that head of yours?
Anything you want to say?
Say it to the camera.
Say it to the camera.
No, it's been fun.
It's been fun.
Yeah.